Guys, Sunday morning here in the UK. Didn't get much sleep last night, and I'm here in the morning doing a video on Danny Garcia versus Keith Thurman. Plan is that later today I'm going to do a more extended video on some more thoughts on Hay versus Bellew the day after the fight. But let's kick it off today with Thurman versus Garcia. Thurman wins on a split decision against Danny Garcia. When I heard a split decision at the end, I thought we were going to be talking about Danny Garcia getting the nod, I must admit. The judges had it 116-112 to Thurman, 115-113 to Thurman, and 115-113 to Garcia. I will start by laying my cards on the table and said that I had Keith Thurman winning the fight. And I think either 116-112 or 115-113 in Keith Thurman's favour were good scorecards. I can't really see an argument to give Danny Garcia this fight. Danny Garcia, for large portions of the fight, was the come-forward fighter. Thurman was on his back foot, and Danny Garcia was maybe the aggressor, if you like. So perhaps that's why one of the judges scored it in Garcia's favour. But I still felt that just judging it round by round, Keith Thurman landed the more effective work for the majority of the rounds. So I find it very, very hard to see how Danny Garcia got the nod on one of these scorecards. Talking about the fight itself, Keith Thurman came out and had a brilliant first 3 rounds. Really, really effective first 3 rounds. And, you know, it's some of the best boxing I've seen from Keith Thurman in his career today. He was so explosive, so fast, so athletic, and, you know, was landing power punches over and over and over again on the chin of Danny Garcia. And Danny Garcia showed a tremendous chin in those first 3 rounds not to go down, because Keith Thurman was punching him with every power punch in his locker. He was hitting him accurately, fastly, again and again and again, and Danny Garcia was just having to eat those punches. So credit to Danny Garcia for staying in, and it looked like it was going to be a very, very long night indeed for him after 3 rounds. So give him tremendous credit for actually making the fight a competitive fight towards the end. I think in the first 3 rounds, Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman were both looking to stand outside of the pocket, if you like, and lunge in with power punches. And I think really Keith Thurman showed he had a huge advantage in that department. His movement was a lot more dynamic than Danny Garcia's. Thurman was a lot lighter on his feet. He was moving from side to side. He was quicker on his feet. Whereas Danny Garcia was kind of plodding forward. He was a bit flat-footed. And he was also smaller. It appeared, to my eye at least, he had a lesser reach than Keith Thurman. So I guess as a result of that, Danny Garcia's punches were often coming up short. Thurman was able to slip them, evade them, and then counter and land hard on Danny Garcia. In the 4th round, I noticed a slight adjustment from Danny Garcia. He seemed less inclined to sit on the outside and you know, try and throw bombs that weren't working. And we begun to see Danny Garcia try and walk Keith Thurman down. And that really was the rest of the fight from rounds 4 to 12, that kind of pattern at that stage. Danny Garcia coming forward, Keith Thurman working away on the back foot, circling, using lateral movement, using the width of the ring, and trying to outbox Danny Garcia from range. And a lot of those fights were competitive rounds. A lot of them were clumsy rounds, and it kind of depends what you prefer, because, you know, Danny Garcia was still the as I say, the come forward aggressor, trying to walk Thurman down and make a scrap of it, whereas Keith Thurman for me was the sharper puncher who was landing faster, harder, snappier, more accurate shots, however you want to call it. So, you know, realistically, in my eyes, Keith Thurman proved to be the superior fighter in this. I actually thought he was still landing the nicer, cleaner work on the back foot, and he appeared to just be the more well-rounded, harder puncher than Danny Garcia. I don't think Keith Thurman faded in the fight. I think Keith Thurman actually answered a lot of questions that people have had about him, including myself in this fight, because he seemed to be lively for the entire 12 rounds. And in addition to that, he did eat some leather from Danny Garcia. He ate some body shots, and yeah, I think Garcia should have gone to the body earlier, and I think he should have looked to work the body of Keith Thurman a lot more than he did. But nevertheless, Thurman showed that he's going to be a hard guy to stop. And, you know, Thurman is not the sort of guy who's just going to wilt from a single punch like a few people thought he may do after the incident with Luis Collazo, where he was clearly hurt to the body. Garcia tactically was missing a lot of punches to the head. And with Thurman's perceived weakness to the body from that Collazo fight, I would have liked to have seen him start to bank bodywork earlier on, or, even sort of jab to the chest, drop to the body, that sort of thing, because, he was struggling to find his range against Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman's movement kept him from setting his feet and kept Danny Garcia from really unloading. And I think it would have been effective from Danny Garcia, if he'd kind of jab the body, drop to the chest. When someone's given a lot of head movement, a lot of footwork, etc., sometimes it's very hard to hit the head. It's a small moving target, whereas the chest, very, very hard to move the centre of your chest. So I'd have liked to have seen Garcia do that more. Keith Thurman, actually we'll come on to that in just a second, but Garcia's, both Angel and Danny both are claiming that they felt they won the fight. Whether that's 100% legitimate, honest, I don't know. After the fight, Keith Thurman was celebrating like a madman. Danny Garcia looked like he'd been beaten. He didn't look like he was celebrating. He didn't look like he thought he won. But clearly, Angel Garcia's had a word in his ear, and after the fight, they're disgusted. They're saying Keith Thurman ran. They're saying they may retire. They didn't want a rematch. Angel Garcia, I saw in an interview saying he wants Danny Garcia to retire. He can't be doing with this nonsense anymore. Keith Thurman just ran all night, etc. I actually thought the corner work from both fighters was very, very dubious. I've got to admit. I had, after 10, Keith Thurman 7-3 up on my cards. But his corner seemed to be giving him the impression that he had an insurmountable lead. And really, Keith Thurman didn't even try to win the last 2 rounds for me. He threw away the last 2 rounds and allowed them to go to Danny Garcia, which meant my end scorecard was 7-5. Now, knowing what I know about boxing, I know that 7-5 is not a convincing enough margin of victory to go to the judges' scorecards with absolute certainty of getting the decision. And I think it was tactically very, very poor of the Thurman corner to almost give him that message. And they didn't spell it out, throw away the last 2 rounds, but they let him know that he had a big lead and just to stay out of trouble. I think tactically that was very, very poor. I mean, how many times has Garcia got the nod in a close fight? Lamont Peterson, Herrera, I could think of more examples. How many times has Garcia got that nod? The Thurman corner allowed Keith Thurman just to throw away those last 2 rounds, and that turned, for me, what was a clear victory for Keith Thurman when he was 7-3 up to a competitive scorecard. And had that not happened, Keith Thurman would definitely have got a unanimous decision for my money. So I thought that was really, really poor from them. And I think if they'd done that 3 or 4 times in fights like this nature, one of those times they'd end up getting robbed. And they'd have no one but themselves to blame. They were the back foot fighter and they decided to run and stop throwing punches in the last 2 rounds. Fair enough if they'd been 10-0 up, but they were 7-3 up. On my card, they were 7-3 up against the fan favourite, the home fighter. They were 7-3 up against a guy who's got numerous close decisions. I thought it was very poor from the Thurman corner. Angel Garcia, look, I'm sure him and his son have a good way of communicating. Obviously, Danny Garcia spent his entire life with Angel, so I'm sure he knows how to understand Angel. I personally found his corner work very, very confusing. The commentators picked up on this as well and said his corner work was very contradictory. Yeah, there was some contradiction there. My bigger concern is Angel Garcia would just be like, okay, when Keith's coming forward, left hook to the body, right uppercut, jab, left hook to the body, right uppercut, right hook. Or, when you're pressing the action, right hook to the body, jab, jab, uppercut, left cross. I'm thinking to myself, how on earth is Danny Garcia going to process that information? He's focused between rounds. He's trying to recover his energy. And then he's going up against an extremely explosive, athletic, quick fighter. I'd have preferred Angel Garcia, rather than rattling off 6-punch combinations he wanted Danny Garcia to throw that would literally be impossible to recall in the heat of the moment. I would have rather him stick to the basics. Garcia was getting hit by that right hand from Thurman over and over and over again. It was Thurman's most successful punch. Yet it wasn't until the second half of the fight I heard Angel Garcia tell Danny Garcia to keep his left hand up. I heard Angel Garcia talking about Danny Garcia banking bodywork, but for me, again, that came too late. That should have been the game plan before the fight. We should have seen Danny Garcia implementing a sustained body attack from round 1. It was the obvious tactic for me. I thought the corner work from both corners was actually fairly average, and I wasn't overly impressed by either side, if I'm completely honest. I also thought the commentary, and I watched the Box Nation coverage in the UK, and they had American commentators, so I don't know if that's Showtime commentators or whatever. I also thought the commentators were fairly average. How many times did you hear the word nice punch or nice shot? You know, the only adjective they had in their lexicon, if you like, was nice. Nice right hand from Thurman, nice left hook from Danny, nice jab from Thurman, nice body work from Danny. You know, I thought that was really average. Just a side note, how many times it was described as nice, you know. Surely if you're paid to speak about boxing, you can come up with a bit more variety than nice. You know, it doesn't really explain to the viewer what's going on from my perspective. But yeah, end of this fight, where do I see both guys? Keith Thurman, credit to him. He won the fight for me. He won the fight well. It was a very good performance from Keith Thurman. He looked dangerous and he looked powerful, athletic, explosive. He's a very good fighter, and he's a fighter for me who has proved the doubters wrong. He's got victories over Sean Porter. He's got victories over Danny Garcia. You know, for me, this propels him right to the top of the welterweight division. I realistically think the only guy you can have above Keith Thurman in the current welterweight top 10 is Manny Pacquiao, and that kind of depends how you rate Manny Pacquiao. Some people think that he's, you know, basically at retirement stage. Some people think he's still an active fighter, but you know, up till relatively recently, Pacquiao was still handling guys like Tim Bradley. So you know, I have Pacquiao still in the mix. So I have Pacquiao and Thurman 1 and 2, and then probably you have the winner of Kell-Brook, Errol Spence, in that conversation as well when that fight is done and dusted. But Keith Thurman, a very exciting fighter, a very explosive fighter, a guy with a huge amount of attributes, and a guy whose weaknesses in terms of stamina, in terms of punch resistance to the body, are either ironed out or are nowhere near as bad a weaknesses as we thought as he was coming up. As for Danny Garcia, he looked the smaller man in there. He looked outgunned in the early rounds, but still he found a way to make it competitive. He showed tremendous chin, tremendous heart, and he's a guy who hopefully will stay in the sport of boxing and be involved in very big, meaningful fights. He can still be in the mix. Whether 147 is the perfect division for him, I don't know. Maybe his punches don't have quite the same zip. Maybe he lacks size for 147, but he might find himself in a difficult position now, because I'm unsure whether he'll be able to get his frame back down to 140. I doubt it, to be honest. So it looks like he's stuck in the 147-pound division. But you know, credit to Danny Garcia. He's been in big fights. I know he's also been in fights that aren't competitive, but if you look how many big names Danny Garcia has been in with in his career, you've got to say it is impressive. And he's a guy. There's a lot of them in boxing at the minute. In the UK, we had 2 last night, Tony Bellew and Sam Eggington. You know, he's a guy who maybe doesn't have the same electric attributes or electric technical skill set as, you know, the top guys in their divisions. But he's clearly much better in real life than he is to watch on film. And he's a hard man to beat. And credit to Keith Thurman for beating him. And yeah, if Danny Garcia wants to continue and he wants to ignore his father's advice to retire, there's fascinating matchups for him left in the welterweight division. He's got a big following, he's got a big name, and I'm sure he can regain the winning way. Let me know your thoughts, people. Do leave your comments in the section below. Do you want a rematch? Do you want Thurman to face the Brooks Spence winner? Who do you want to see Danny Garcia in next? Is a rematch a likely route? I don't know. I'm recording this before I've watched most of the coverage, so I don't know if other YouTube channels and have speculated on it, and I don't know if the fighters have commented on it after the fight, so let me know. If you've enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed before for whatever reason, my logo's on the screen around here. Click on that and press subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, help me get more visibility by clicking the thumbs up button. Thanks for watching, guys.